Good morning. This is a called meeting of the Forsyth County Finance Committee. This is a continuation of discussion of Budget Track 1, which is the General Fund, Fire Fund. And with that, is there a motion to adopt the agenda? It was attached to this Zoom invite.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Dave, wave your hand.
Sorry, aye. I'm used to watching the other meetings.
Dave, any update in terms of revenues or?
No new economic data that we've seen yet. We're looking toward the end of this week to get our sales tax numbers in for April.
Okay.
Are we going to talk about setting a number anytime on the agenda or at the end of the meeting or some type of goal? I mean, how are we going to know to go back to departments and ask them to cut things, or how we could adjust if we don't start doing that now?
We can have that discussion. Would you like to add that to the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll do that after item C, the discussion of the budget. Okay, with that, Dave, you want to start on item C in terms of the continuation?
All right. We should hopefully have Steve Zering back with us for his 3 areas. Steve, if you're on, I'll start us off with code compliance.
So
It's on page 42. I'll give you a little instruction, Steve, and then go over that. There are no new items requested there. The continuation budget is up 10.89%, and that's primarily, or at least in part, due to the increase in operating expenses, but let me explain that a little bit. You'll see a 92% increase in operating expenses from 75,000 up to about 145. That whole increase is seen in the line for software, and actually that has come on. This is why it's not a new item. In the adopted budget, it was not there to start the year, but since the year started, they have amended the budget to include new software costs for the host compliance, and Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, and the other one has to do with security software. So that cost is a continuation of what's been amended in 2020. It's not something new for 2021. And with that, I'll let Steve go ahead and comment on those.
that is correct. I'm guessing you can hear me.
Yes.
So the host compliance is the software we use to track short-term rentals, and that is an annual fee. It's 17,000 and some high change. Again, that's just the annual. The other software is the cameras that the sheriff's office uses in the county parks to track incidents and so on and so forth. And because I have the park rangers, it was thought that it be best added to my budget. We started that mid last year, and so it continues for 21.
It's the who wants that item to appear in their budget item.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I think it should belong to the sheriff's office, but we've already been down that road. I mean, I think the sheriff's office will use it far greater than code enforcement.
Correct. We don't have any access to it, so it is solely accessible to the sheriff's office.
Eric, why did it work that way? The sheriff just didn't want it?
We're talking about this. Sorry, I was looking at my budget notes. So Steve, you're talking about the video cameras at the parks?
That's correct.
That they can't even access. And it went on their budget to make it look like their budget's increased.
Well, here's the reason. First of all, I think the sheriff traded off that there was something else he was willing to have go into his budget at the same time. But Steve has, outside of code enforcement, he has park rangers who provide security to the parks. So even though they don't have access to the information, that was the compromise that the sheriff was looking to trade off, that he would add some items to his budget, and we can go back and talk to the sheriff, but it was because Steve has the park rangers within his budget.
That $62,000 for cameras, that is a one-time cost?
No. This
That's
is in
yearly.
fact software as a service, isn't it, Steve?
That's correct.
So it's gonna be 62,000 every year for the cameras?
It's based on the number of cameras. So if the board decided that you didn't want that, but that's probably the
We
cost.
need it.
It's probably the cost of one position or less.
We need those desperately. I just would argue that if park rangers and the park department and, I mean, code enforcement can't even access it, they can't even touch it. It's for public safety. It should have been under a public safety budget.
And if I remember correctly, when Major Patton made his presentation to the board, that they function more like a tag reader. And of course, none of us as civilian employees have access to run tags via GCIC. That's state statute, but and I think that that may lend to why it's only accessible to the SO.
That's all. It's just a comment.
Yeah.
I just think we have to be careful doing items like that.
Well, I think the same thing. I mean, I know that one consideration was to put it into Parks and Rec's budget. And I think if you asked, not to set up with Jim Pryor, but if you asked Jim Pryor what his next priority was, I don't know that it was putting security cameras in parks.
And I understand that. And if you can't access them, then I don't blame Jim. But from a county commissioner standpoint,
Yeah.
I got asked about it frequently when people's cars kept getting broken into. They'd go on the trails, they'd go on different things, and they kept having their windows smashed. It was happening more and more frequently. And we did something similar for the fire department. And I kept being asked, can we not have that when somebody attempted to grab a lady at Central Park and while she was walking, and, it is a safety thing. It is a public safety thing, in my opinion. And that's why I think only public safety can access it.
Okay. Steve, anything else you want to discuss?
No, those are only two additions that we had. We went with what was provided to us via finance, which was a help. So,
Well, Steve, I must say, even though you had this large increase that you had not had in the past of the cameras put on your budget, the total increase still is only our operating expense is still only, well, close to 11% whenever you had this huge increase put on there, which really is pretty good. And I was looking at where things have come down on your budget, and there was a decrease in small tools. I don't know what that covers, but also it looks like a part-time position no longer exists that maybe existed before that you've cut.
so yes, ma'am. So we had two part-time positions that function as courtesy officers there at the administration building, and that too was part of the camera deal that the sheriff would supply or provide a deputy for the admin building all day, every day. And so that eliminated those positions, and we brought those positions turned into a full-time for 21, maybe. We'll see what our need is. So that position is in the budget, just the position only, not associated cost. So that's what that elimination was. And our small tools are just the day-to-day materials we use. It could be cameras, it could be just different field tools that staff, both park and code compliance, use. We're trying to keep up with the changing times with the technology and stuff. So we're trying to utilize what's out there to best service the community.
Okay, so it looks like the full-time position, you're asking to add a full-time position, that would be about, what, about 63,000 a year, it looks like?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's the way it shakes out.
Okay.
And has that got a lot to do with the short-term rentals?
It does.
So after you cut that part-time position, it's really about 47,000 increase on an annual basis, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That makes sense, what you said about the sheriff trading that out. That I remember that discussion now that you brought it up, Steve. I just think we need to remember when the sheriff does, if in 2021 it happens, he slides that position to you, that we should slide the cameras to him.
Okay.
Yeah, so I agree, Commissioner Mills. That was the trade-off, is that at basically the same time, by providing a full-time deputy for the admin building and outside, including the parking garage, they freed up money within Steve's budget for 2 part-time positions, which we converted to a full-time. Full-time actually costs more than the 2 part-time because of benefits, I think. But the trade-off was that they'd absorb the cost of the additional deputy in their budget, and we would absorb the cost of the software service at the parks. But yeah, as you said, I mean, there's 3 different ways you could look at it. It's a parks associated item. They're only physically at the parks. It's a security issue, and Steve provides the park rangers, but ultimately only the sheriff's office can access the license plate data that comes off. And that's not done real time. That's done in the event that there's, Steve, I believe if there's an incident, they can go back and look.
That is correct.
Steve, have you heard back from the park rangers? Has our car break-ins decreased since we put those in?
I'm unfamiliar with what the law enforcement reports are. Excuse me. And with the pandemic issues, we had limited patrol as far as park rangers in the park.
Eric, if you could check on that, that would be good for us to know.
Okay. Yeah, as you're saying that, what I'm wondering is, so that people don't vandalize the cameras, I don't know, I haven't stopped to look at whether the cameras are obvious. If they're not obvious, then it would only be if we caught someone that we would reduce the crime. But I'll check in with the sheriff's office. I don't know if they may have someone on, but if not, I'll check in with them.
And I will say, to the point of cameras, and to back up what Commissioner Mills said, in incidences that we have dealt with at the skate park, the cameras that are there have been a tremendous asset to us. And they're positioned such that the common folks don't see them and or can't reach them to damage them. So certainly having additional eyes, if you will, within a park at the entrances and whatnot is going to be a huge benefit.
We should have had them pointed at our restrooms, because we had people stealing toilet paper out of our restrooms before we closed them.
Well, that's one of those privacy issues. So,
and people don't have a license plate, so it wouldn't have helped us too much. All right. Any other questions for that?
Okay, moving on to Steve's other areas. Down on page 76 is animal services. And there are, as you move down to that page 76, there's no new items requested. All the way at the bottom line, the 21 continuation budget shows a decrease of 8.4%. But however, to make a good comparison, that's because of the capital that was included in this budget in 2020 for the new positions, which are not in 21. If you look at just the operating expenditure section, it's up 4.75%, mostly driven by the salaries and benefits because the operating expenses are virtually flat. They're just up a couple $100 at 0.8%. And that's a summary. Steve, anything to add to that? Animal services?
No, sir, but and we did request an increase for our gasoline and diesel line. We don't have any diesel, but we go through that budget pretty rapidly.
It is up to 2,100, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, and then, excuse me, we did put in a request via IS&T for possible software for animal services. I don't see that in there. I don't know how.
we may not have gotten that back from them yet after they go through it.
Yep. And what that was for is just to, trying to find software that is compatible with 311. Tyler does have a product through Intergov that is specific to animal control. We haven't had a good look-see at it yet. Brandon wanted to get Intergov up and running and stuff before we sit down with him and go through what what would be available through that. There are, we utilize the Pet Point system. It does well, but it does have its flaws as well.
So, Steve, I've got a question on animal control, or a couple of questions. And Dave, this might be you to begin with. How much have we increased that budget since we took it from the sheriff's office?
It was pretty significant because we increased the staffing levels, didn't we, Steve?
We did. We started with 5, and we realized that we were short. We'd shortchanged based on the information, numbers, and stuff that we looked at, and the guidance we received. Excuse me, and we added 2. So we're up to with the 7 field officers, count the supervisor, and then 1 senior admin.
And do you think that's enough? It gets the job done?
There are days that it's stretched. Commissioner, it's you just kind of never know how it's going to run out. We got our head above water, but it is we're busy.
So did the demand increase that much, or were we just not really doing it before?
It was both, and especially during this last 7 or 8 weeks. Holy smokes!
It's been awful.
So
I know just from the complaints I've gotten, people are home, and so they're all getting on each other's nerves.
Yes, ma'am, agreed. But overall, we see an increase, and we handle things more. We do more than had been done prior. We're making contact with the folks. We're not handling things over the phone. We're writing the citations. We're going to court. It's busy.
Speaking of that, real quickly, when we had magistrate court on with their budget, Steve, I think I opened up a little, or caused a little testiness to occur when I said that if there's something in our ordinances that need beefing up, please let us know. And this was to Judge Bramlett. So we can, because I sense that times our code enforcement does all they can, and I know a few in my district that you and I've had this conversation about, and then it gets to court and it just dies. And is there communication? I mean, we can't tell a judge how to rule, but we can improve our ordinances to make it easier for him to rule. Are you sensing it's gotten any better, or are we still going through that?
We're still going through it. And quite frankly, Judge Bramlett hasn't been on the bench. We have the associate magistrates, and as you said, we can't tell them. All we can do is we present our case, or Ken's office presents our case, and I will say that Molly and Melissa, they fight. And but the bottom line is the opinion of the judge, and and their interpretation sometimes is different than ours.
And Commissioner Mills, let me jump in and say that I appreciated your discussion on that point. I thought that was a good conversation, and I thought it needed to be had. Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome, but I think we ought to look and do a chart of the cases because where's Brandon? Data means everything, doesn't it, Brandon? And so I think we need to look at the number of cases that we take and the actions, like have an ongoing chart, of the cases and the actions, that next time, that we send over and that we have a discussion about it and say, I mean, I think we need that fairly soon, but just so we can say, we're not making this up. And would it matter if we put who the judge is on the case? Or I just think that if we need, as a board of commissioners, that's what we do, is adopt policy. And we get the complaints, and I've got some, Steve knows, that have been horrific, of people just abandoning, practically doing just the bare minimum to not be in abandonment, but just solid way. I mean, just enormous amount of stuff that the neighbors have really, watched and keyed in on. And Steve and them have been right on it. They have done everything they can. And if we're failing and it's slipping through the cracks, we're wasting the money of code enforcement, the time, all the effort, that we need to look at what are we doing wrong, or what, at least show them the true results.
And something to keep in mind with that, a violator goes to court, they have the option of requesting a jury trial. Excuse me. And several times our cases are sent to state court. And whether or not the solicitor chooses to prosecute them or not, because they have budget concerns and stuff over there as well. And sometimes they just get hung up over there for weeks and months at a time. And then they decide not to do anything with it. So that's another portion of this.
Do you think the violators know that, Steve, and they play the system with that?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Because we'll see runs on it. We won't have any for a couple of months, and then all of a sudden, if I sit there in court and say I'll request a jury trial, and then everybody else that's in the courtroom is going to do the same thing.
Steve?
Yes.
So Judge Bramlett responded to the question that we asked, and his answer was 3 people demanded jury trials in 2019, 6 the year before. So he's saying all of last year, there were only 3 times for any issue. And I think we know one of them because we got sued over it.
Yeah. So, I mean, but that is a variable. So
He brought up the whole civil liberty, like we're trying to take people's liberties away, the way I took it.
Yeah.
We're enforcing the code and applying as I mean, we can't make stuff up. It's got to be a violation, and we got to have proof. But once we have that, then we're able to issue the citation, and then the rest of it is through the process.
Any other questions with animal services? Okay, Dave?
All right, the next section, last one under Steve's area is animal shelter. Just slip down a few pages. The summary is on page 79. No new items requested here. And this would almost be the definition of a flat budget. The bottom line is a decrease of 0.29%. Actually, operating expenses are down almost 8% or 26,000. That offsets somewhat the increases from salary and benefit cost increases. And that's about it. I'm not sure if we got some callers online. Cindy may be on the call.
She is on the call.
All right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good morning.
Okay, perfect. I was having some microphone issues. I have to go off my phone. So I just want to be sure everyone can hear me.
Go ahead.
What was the question?
Thank you for no increase in your budget. No, there's no new items requested.
You're welcome.
There's no new items requested,
Easy
but these are opportunities for the committee to ask questions about your budget overall and operations and so on.
Yes, sir.
Cindy, what's the timeline for the vehicle that was funded by SPLOST?
So that's kind of just been put on hold right now based on everything going on. But it will take about 6 months to build out. So once we're ready to go, we can start getting bids and stuff. I have a list of companies that we can solicit information from and such.
Cindy, we're getting feedback. Do you have two different audios going? Do you have your computer still going?
No, I'm sitting in Steve's office. Let me try and step out, see if that helps.
Maybe just take it off a speakerphone.
I'm not on
Oh,
speaker either.
Well, Steve, maybe you need to. Okay.
Yeah, I'm having issues.
That's good.
Are you on mute, Steve? Is that better?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Let me
you.
step away. All right, I stepped away from the computer. Okay.
Cindy, I've got a question on,
Yes, ma'am.
since we're gonna be opening the dog park, hopefully by the end of this year, do you need any budget for events there, or you don't think that will cost you anything?
So we have a event line budget with that in mind. So I think that that's sufficient, and it's minimal since we just have to walk across the street, which is great. And we have a lot of event supplies already. So, but we do have stuff. We got this year got a new logo, and we have some, adoption promotion stuff. And so I think we're pretty good to go.
Sounds great. And that might be an opportunity to get sponsors too, to sponsor some
For sure,
events,
yeah. Yes, there's
I can
been some interest. I know that, some people have reached out to do maybe like a community event of different adoption organizations to kind of highlight the dog park. And we've talked about agility events and stuff like that. So
I think that would be awesome. I think that'd be awesome if, when we get closer to knowing when it'll be done, if we were to have a big event just with your dogs, like a, grand opening.
Like a grand
something.
opening. Sure. Yeah. Once we have a more definitive date of the opening, I think that would be a really good way for us to do a huge event.
Walmart would probably be willing to sponsor that. I know they can do the $2,500 donations for things like that.
They've come through our shelter a couple of times. Their management for tours, for maybe doing like volunteer days, and they've offered to put like flyers in people's bags that when we're doing any kind of adoption event. They said we could table there whenever we want. But I think that they would definitely do that for sure.
Yeah, let's plan it. I'll help you plan it and get some partners on that.
Sounds great.
So Cindy, to go back to your vehicle, do you have a timeline? I see you've got 700
Yeah,
feral
so
cat
once we-
intake next year, so.
Yeah, so once we have the go-ahead to start the planning, we can put the specs together. We have a lot of it done internally, and we can send it out to the different companies.
Okay. David, do you have any concern about the money?
You mean buying it in SPLOST?
Yeah,
Well, we always have concern about the money in SPLOST with the collections, but what we watch that with the cash flow, the other things. I mean, we do have SPLOST cash on hand now, but we just have to manage that carefully as we go forward. But if we have concerns with her purchase, we'll step in.
And we're also still trying to find a part-time veterinarian. We haven't had any luck in anyone interested in that position. So we are working on that as well, because that's going to be really important.
sure. What's the timeline to build a vehicle?
It takes about 6 months.
Yeah,
With everything going on now, I don't know as far as like parts. I know things are on delay of coming overseas and such. So it might be a little bit longer based on the, recent world change.
yeah.
They do
How
have
about medical supplies?
sometimes
Because the bookmobile is under construction out in Colorado as we speak.
Oh, great. We've been pretty lucky on supplies. We've been able to get stuff pretty easily, so I'm not too concerned about the supplies of the
Okay.
medical supplies. It's more of the actual customization of the, the vehicle itself.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Steve.
Thank y'all.
Okay, with that on the agenda, we can move back down to the general government section, and we'll start our way through that with page 181, which starts off with the administration budget. And as everyone is turning down to that section, and then we'll be pretty much in order with this section. The administration budget is showing a decrease of 2.28%, and that's driven mostly by, if you look at the operating expenses, more than offsetting normal salary and benefit cost increases, that declines by 35%, and that's driven by the professional services budget line being dropped by $65,000. And Eric may want to address it. I think Eric was even looking at maybe bringing that down more.
Yeah, I mean, that's one that can be, it's helpful to have. On the other hand, in relation to other needs, it may not be the highest need. Just to give you a sense of the 49,211 that was spent in 2019, that reflected two things. One was when Karen came on, we kept Jody Gardner under a contract that crossed, I think, 3 fiscal years, a maximum of 50,000, and we didn't spend all 50,000, but Jody has worked on various projects, the most recent one being the helping us get ready for the census. And so that's been one. The other thing that we spent some money on in 2019, and we've spent a little bit this year, but not very much, is a fleet consultant. So we had a national fleet consultant come in and do a study, and that was competitively bid. But Commissioner Cooper, when you had a meeting with a group from off of Pilgrim Mill, is it Pilgrim Circle, the road that is just west of, or just east of 400?
Yes.
So there was an individual that attended that who actually has run fleets around the country. Most recently, I think he was in, where's the Alamo? San Antonio. And he's, I think, semi-retired, but what I brought him in under a contract of up to $20,000. And again, I don't think we've used all of the $20,000, is to help mentor our fleet director, because it's one thing to have a consultant come in and tell you a variety of things to do, and then it's another thing to actually start to roll those out. So he's been working. We got a good rate for him because he, I think, lives about 3 or 4 miles from our fleet facility, so it was convenient for him. But he's been working over the last year, a few hours at a time, kind of helping fleet roll out some of the things that came from the fleet study. So those are two things I've used those dollars for. We reduced it from 145,000 to 80, but it could go lower. It's a matter of what kind of flexibility you want the manager to have to be able to bring people in to work on some of these special projects.
Well, I think you know that, and it's been good. We've always had a discussion, at least this past year, I'd say for the past 6 months, maybe 9 months, before a consulting group is brought in and before the money is spent. So as far as I'm concerned, as a commissioner, if we know ahead of time of what is being brought in and what the fee is, because it may be something, there have been a few times when we have said, no, it's not necessary.
Sure.
Commissioner Mills was able to bring some college kids in that saved us a lot of money. And I think it was on the Matt Elementary School refurbishing. So whenever those kind of things can be brought in and made money saved, that is so relevant. And the fact that you have done that and that discussion is happening prior to the contracting of the consultants makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cooper brings up a great point that I think would be beneficial to us because it gets buried within a budget. But I would love to see consulting. I'd like to see consulting costs broken out within, like a chart that shows us these are all the consulting groups that was hired. This is how much it was paid. And this was the reason, because sometimes it's totally board driven. I mean, just like the fleet study, we wanted something added, and the fleet study needed doing, but is there overlap? Are we doing things sometimes that if we could do better if we were more concise and the left hand knew what the right hand was doing more, and that we could even use things, if it's data that we're looking for, maybe we could use the IT department to help more. Maybe there's ways that we could use our own department. I mean, frankly, I'm not saying it's perfect and it doesn't need tweaking and improvements, but the Coal Mountain overlay was a good example of what, we were able to do with a group of citizens and then with staff to develop the code to go with it. Right now, I'm out of the beautification funds for North Forsyth. We've spent $60,000 or going close to spending $60,000 on a mixed use plan. Well, I'm fearful, and it's just me being selfish, but I'm developing that plan for the town center. I brought it forward, had the vision for it, but then if all of a sudden the rest of the districts wind up using it because we've been trying to get a mixed use category forever, why is it fair that I've paid for for every, for what's going to be used countywide out of my beautification funds? If that's the case, then why is District 2 and District 5 not paying for their funds for their Southeastern or whatever it's called, their plan? I just think that we have to be careful when we start doing things about visioning and doing that. If they're going to be used countywide, then I don't know why one district should have to pay for it. But I do think that we need to look at how much we spend on consultants and be mindful to have that comparison. I wouldn't just look at it for 2019. I would look at it for 2018. I mean, when the comp plan was going on, that was a lot of money. But I think citizens need to see that too. I really do.
Dave, I think you could probably pull that from the financial system, couldn't you?
Well, yeah, we can, first of all, just pull out an initial report to see how broad consultant services are across the organization. Because I mean, that even gets into projects and so on, where they help to manage like road projects and so on. But no, sure, we can first, that'll be a starting point, and bring up a report of where we've charged all these types of costs.
2 points I'd like to make.
And it might be good once, I'm sorry, Molly, go ahead.
That's okay. 2 points I'd like to make on this. One, it's so easy to do. It's been done that way. And I'm not pointing a finger and criticizing, because one gets accustomed to doing something the way it's always been done. And we have to break that mold. That's one. Two, on our conservation zoning, we have away from the consulting group that came up with that whole thing. And since we've pulled away and we've been doing this from a committee standpoint, we see where the consultant had many flaws in that study that they brought to us, how general it was, how incomplete it was, and how actually incompatible in a lot of ways to our area. So there was a lot of money wasted, quite frankly, on that particular study. And we need to learn a lesson from that.
We're finding that out on the tree ordinance, aren't we?
Absolutely.
There was a total disconnect, and I think we've been able to make great progress once we were able to do that. But by the same token, Dave, when you do that report, I think it's only fair to departments to be able to tell us, yeah, in Department of Engineering, we've spent this much money on Moreland, but we've been managing a budget that, was very much bigger, and we could have hired X amount of employees to do that budget, but instead this has been possibly a cost savings, since the bond is a limited time. We thought it was a limited time factor. It just keeps going and going and going. But I think that's, you can't just look at a number and be able to assess, oh my God, that's a terrible thing. Or that's a great thing. You have to know what it was while they were hired to be able to assess it.
I agree. I think you start by pulling the data for the last couple of years, and then if you want to go earlier, you can go earlier. You break it out and start to look at who was the vendor, what was the purpose, and in some cases, I think with planning, as an example, their perspective was, first of all, they didn't have any place to put anyone. So we've started to resolve that by leasing some space, actually getting buildings built out on West Maple. So we had some place to put employees. But sometimes it's an issue of, if you want something turned around quickly, who can turn something around quickly? A consultant. The question is, as you've just been saying, do you like what they gave you, or did you just get something done fast that you don't actually want to implement? But I think you do want to go through and look kind of consultant by consultant, what the project was, why we used them, and lessons learned. If it's something that you don't want to repeat, then every department kind of understanding where you don't, see a consultant as advantageous over hiring staff and using interns or volunteers in order to get the best bang for the buck. I think you now have a new approach by finding ways to lease at least space until you can get more space for us. And of course, we're now learning that we'll probably have some people that will never need to have space for in the future because they can work remotely. So I think you start to use a modern approach and bring it all together. But I think, Commissioner Cooper, to your point, we don't just do things because we've done it historically. Commissioner Mills, to your point, you really need to deep dive into each individual one to understand why it was done. Is it the pattern you want to continue or not? And one size doesn't fit all.
Well, Eric, when you do your report, or Dave, I bet you're going to find, and it would be nice to have how long it took to get it done, because my experience with the consultant is not that they get it done in a more timely fashion. Look at design standards. We thought when we put that moratorium on District 4 for the design standards that we weren't going to be 2 years later. And I don't blame that all on consultant, because we couldn't make a decision. But if we had made a decision based upon what the consultant gave us, it would have been a horrific decision. I believe that it's like seeing things through a vacuum, or like if they're more used to dealing with metro areas or urban areas, they're putting things. I agree with Molly. At times it feels like all they're doing is copying and pasting from another jurisdiction that is not ours. And then it's like they just throw it all against the wall, and then we have to peel back the layer after layer after layer, when, my God, it looks like our staff could do that. We can copy and paste.
I agree with Commissioner Mills. And on that time, I quite frankly, I disagree that they are more timely. I have found them to be, they take a great deal of time, and we pay them a lot of money. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're getting paid thousands and thousands of dollars, you need to move along. I find that ridiculous. I really do. I think they're overpaid. I think the material that they produce has not been worth the money that they have been paid for, at least that which I have seen. And where are we right now with our impact study? How long is that taking? So I don't see the consultants, unless it is something that we absolutely do not have the tools or ability to do in-house. I do not see consultants as an advantage in the least.
Okay.
Dennis, how do you feel about this? What action?
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, and yeah, especially with that tree ordinance, I think there were a lot of things that was our arborist had already, made those points and things, and I think we do spend probably more money, but I think we're reaching a culmination here where we're actually realizing that, and going forward, I think the less that we can, there is a time and a place for consultants, and like you said, with specific capabilities that our staff doesn't, but I think our staff is very capable. One of the things, especially on that tree ordinance, that a lot of that just, I don't ever remember giving the kind of guidance to them for the things they brought back. Is like they brought back something from DeKalb County or something. I don't know. It just didn't make a lot of sense. But I agree with both of you in principle about that. But we just need to look at it. Each case is different, and wherever we can do a county-wide overlay and then just tweak that minor, that helps with the staff's resources to where we don't have to reinvent the wheel for everything, because a lot of the underlying standards I think are the same, or the high quality that we expect, and then we just tweak them for the specific areas.
Exactly.
Based on the nodes in the character areas.
Right, in the community area. You're right. I agree. And I have found that in working, and I have worked more with Vanessa and Heather and with Greg, and I have found, I've been very impressed. These are very qualified people that are so good at what they do.
Our staff, every product they bring is, to me, is good or better than any of the.
I agree.
But we just have to be careful that we don't, cover them up with too many, because I do think a lot of the commonality, the modular type product for our standards can be a lot the same county-wide, because they're really the same thing. It's about that 20 to 25% where you branch off to something that's specific for a character area or a node. And then we could save a lot of efficiencies there by using that modularity, if you would.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely.
Dennis, that's a great point, and that's a point that I believe, especially planning, is going to bring back to us, that, we all have ideas for our own districts or for the county or for whatever, and
right.
Especially with the new comp plan. And we're going to be entering the third year maybe of the comp plan,
yeah.
And we still haven't even gotten to residential, categories. Molly's
right.
been working on that one herself, just the Res 2 conservation. But we talked when we did the comp plan that we were going to revisit all the categories and try to make it fit more with our comp plan. By the time we get it done, it's going to be time to update the comp plan. And that's just the truth.
Yeah, it
and
is.
I think that the reorganization and hopefully this software will help planning tremendously, but I'm hesitant to say that we shouldn't do any consultants when we're trying to do things to benefit our districts and the county and get things done in a timely manner. But at the same time, I think we could do it better in-house. I think we could do better, having, and maybe, a lot of this some of it ties to economic development. So maybe Vivian could be where she could help us on some of it. This whole mixed use category is such a driving engine for economic development. And I just think that we've got to look at how can we get things moving forward and get it accomplished and done. We're not reinventing things. It's not like we're doing something new that other people haven't done.
A thought, to tie some of what you've been talking together. So when you hire a consultant, frequently it's someone from outside of town. They may or may not be in the metro area. you pay to fly them in when they need to be in for specific meetings. You could do the same thing with a position. I mean, we've now learned the efficiency of people working remote. You know, you could create a couple positions in Tom's department where you may hire the best person available out there. They may be in an entirely different metropolitan area, but they become your employee. They work full-time for us. They can do a lot of what they do remote. And when they need to be in for a public meeting, it doesn't cost any more to fly someone in for a meeting here than it costs for a consultant, but it's entirely under your control and they're working full-time for you. I mean, you may find people that you could hire with expertise that may not otherwise want to move in the middle of this COVID-19 situation, but I'm not trying to sell you on this today, but just a thought to consider. You may be able to get some resources where we don't have to find office space or computers, and it's much cheaper than the consultant, and they work for you. And every lesson they learn as they work on issues for you, they carry to the next project they work on. There may be an opportunity that we didn't really have before this.
No, that's a good point. That's something to consider. Something else I would like to consider in addition to that is look at our higher education facilities. Because when I see these studies, I'm telling you what, it is, you know, business 101. It is freshman level. I'm sorry, but it is not this big production that's worth $100,000 paid to a consultant. I've said that over and over, and I mean it. I am not impressed with what I have seen. Now, there's some where the data is very specific. When you get into engineering, when you get into roads, yes. But when you're talking about the comprehensive plan, you're talking about the tree ordinance, you're talking about urban or rural development, how we're going to go with that in our projections, I am telling you, it has been very, very generalized material that we've paid a lot of money for. And I think we could get it for free with it being giving credit to a group of kids in college for them to do it and them take a semester to do it. That is something I think we need to consider.
Okay.
Yep. So,
So let me make a proposal back on the admin budget. What if we take that 80 for next year down to 20, which allows some money to deal with bringing someone in on an hourly basis very selectively without a significant dollar amount being allocated?
I'm good with that.
yeah,
I think you want a little bit of flexibility, but in these times, it's really hard to be setting aside a lot of money when, you know, the census is done. Jody's been helpful. She had worked on the last census, so that's why we used her. But I think that would be my proposal.
Well, we've hired more people. Karen's got an assistant now. I definitely don't know why we're having to reach out and get more people. And I love Jody. I just adore Jody. But I don't know, now that we've hired another person to be helping Karen, why is there a need to have to contract out?
No, and that's why we basically told her that when the 2-year period ended, that we didn't see that we plan to use her going forward. But so I agree with you, but you don't know from one year to the next what issue comes up. So I think having the manager has some flexibility to be able to spend a small amount makes sense. We started Jody when we didn't have the communications director position filled. So that was advantageous to be able to have her continue some activities part-time, working remote. And that was the key. She's done her work working remote. I don't know that she ever came to town when she was working on that. So that's just another illustration of sometimes that ability to get someone that has skills outside our community. But if you'll agree, we'll take it down to $20,000. Is that agreeable to everyone?
It is with me.
I'm
Okay.
good with that.
Thank you. Any other questions about line item detail there?
Where is the commissioner's visioning the money? Is it still in admin or does it have its own separate place?
So the visioning, you mean the district identification funds that
Yes.
the 250,000 per year? That's over in the capital fund where we try to put all the projects now.
And as capital dollars, that's how that's able to kind of roll from year to year.
I mean, I I think that Molly and I've talked about it a little bit. I think that we could cut that money into half if we have to with the budget, or either do half up front and then have a look at it, like if we're setting aside money to go back to and look at, mid-year to be able, that would free up enough money to hire a position to do UDC changes, more than enough. If it's 250 now, and if we were to cut it to 125, you look at that times 5. That would, if Tom had a place and we had somebody that could just focus on UDC changes, we could find another Jerry, or, an employee that is as gifted as Jerry is. I think, it would be wonderful to have that ability and save a tremendous amount of money.
Right. Cutting that in half would reduce the transfer in the continuation budget down to 625,000 from the $1 million a quarter. So it would be a reduction of 625,000, and each district will still have its 500,000 from these first 2 years, less what was ever spent. There's a small amount that's been spent in a few districts.
And we get the 50,000, right?
Right. That's another separate spot
You
too.
still
Right.
have your 50,000 beautification.
Right.
What does the other 2 commissioners think about that?
I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'm good.
We have to get the work done. We have to be able to do our task. And let's face it, the UDC is something that is in constant flux and has been a frustration for all of us. And no one has had the time to be able to concentrate specifically on that.
It seems like planning struggles with UDC changes more than they do with just about anything.
Well, to their credit though, Cindy, I think we bring so many of those things forward and so often that they're just continuously in a churn.
But I don't see that that's going to stop in a growing community. I don't see that. We're going to continue to have the demands of the citizens, and honestly, if you're not improving, you're going backwards in some ways. There's ways you don't develop a brand new comp plan and not have a plan of action to get those things going. And I feel like we're dragging miserably in trying to get things going to represent the changes. And it's the cycle's about going to start over, and here we are not finishing the implementation of what we started.
One of the things from the standpoint of the UDC changes, and it is, I know that I've put changes in there. I wasn't planning it, but due to necessity, there are changes that I've requested. But
it's reactionary.
Yeah, and one of the things that I see that if we have someone that specifically is assigned to that, and that is what they do, then they can also clean it up and get rid of some of those things that applied years ago that will never apply again, that can get in the way. Because we have that, like you had the one where there was a lot that could only be developed for, I think it was for storage, for outdoor storage. That was all you could do with it. Things like that, where we can have some changes made that apply to now, and things that will never apply again, clear those off.
I agree, because you look at the Publix at Matt, and I think that when it's done, we're going to see that's going to be a huge driving engine for economic development. And other things to come. But literally, Tom finally had to just set aside Sharon Farrell to help walk it through, because the layers of bureaucracy was stopping that project. You had the big box ordinance, you had Chapter 12 commercial, you had Coal Mountain overlay, and there was something else. There were 4 or 5 different different policies or different things in the UDC that contradicted each other, and it was so convoluted that you couldn't tell which one was applied and which one has the greater, trumps the others. And if we had just had a person, because once Sharon was pulled off, it's just we stop our own economic development sometimes by the rules that are in place and how they contradict each other. And if we're going to be asking for departments to cut their budget, it's only fair that we cut ours too.
Questions, comments? Dave, are you still here? We
Yep,
lost
I'm
your
still here. I have
picture.
to turn off the camera because it draws down my power in the computer.
Okay.
But I'm good. As long as you see my name up there, I think I'm still good. All right, ready to move on to, we've kind of sort of gotten to this area to start with, but the next area is the Board of Commissioners. Basically, it's their office budget here
Okay.
on page 184. And in total, it's an increase of 2.74%, which is just driven by the salary benefits costs. Operating expenses up 1.88%. That's just all the operating costs are same, except we had to increase the cell phone cost to match what was spent last year. Other than that, the cost is the same. By the way, this is their office budget where for the commissioners' benefit, their travel, education, and training is budgeted. And we did bring that up in 2020 to a certain amount per commissioner. And we've repeated that amount for 2021. And that's about all that's there. Oh, let me comment. I'm sorry. There is a professional services line there at 95,000, 78,000 spent in the prior year. Things that are charged there are, first of all, the Lake Lanier Association, 20,000 each year is charged there. And then beyond that, it's the various things through the year that the commission has done, which don't fall into any other specific area. For example, when we go out to consider purchasing a piece of land and there's appraisals and other surveys and things that have to be done, until it gets married to a specific project, those kinds of general charges get charged here to this professional service line. It's not so much that there's consultants here as it is for individual smaller amount services that come up from the activities of the board as a whole. And that's what's in that budget.
Good to go here.
Okay.
All right. If we're ready for the next one, move back into a service area of the public and business licenses down on page 186. And let me move down to that. And I believe Amy is on the line. We do have one request here for an additional position. I think what Amy was, I'll let her comment on this, what she was looking at is the increase in total activity on this department. And you don't see a comparable budget here because it was brought over in the middle of last year from into a different cost center out of planning. And Amy, you still on the call?
I am. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Amy.
What page are we on?
186 is the summary page. We're going down pretty much in order now.
Okay.
All right. So basically, obviously, this is pre-COVID-19. I do have a position acquisition request for additional staff member. It's one of the lower paying positions for administrative assistant, basically to assist with business license. It's in order to maintain our current service level. In business license, basically, I've done a little bit of research over the past, from 2018 to 2019. Obviously, we have to see, wait to see what happens this year. We've had a 6.4% increase from 1.5 million to over 1.6 million for business licensing. The alcohol license applications have also increased during that time frame, about 10%. We also do the alcohol permitting that increased 9.25%. You know, I know Commissioner Simonson had talked about, you know, looking into that and maybe, you know, just some discussion around not permitting. But with that being said, you know, our levels have increased steadily over the years. We also had the addition of a zoning inspector position last May, and that was really, really wonderful addition to my department. And that zoning inspector brought in over $120,000 worth of revenue in just a half a year. This year in Q1, that zoning inspector has brought in over $26,000. Obviously, right now we're not going out approaching business owners for, you know, any type of revenue. We're going out just to assist and get them, if there's any paperwork that they need to give us, just to get them current, just to, you know, give them that accelerated customer service level. So that might be a little bit skewed this year due to COVID-19. You know, obviously, I'm going to piggyback on the planning and how consultants were used. I know that we have talked at a work session, and the board had directed me to look at the alcohol ordinance, and that's kind of like the UDC. It's always ever changing, and my department, and specifically me, I've been tasked with going out, finding what areas, what different municipalities are doing, what we can offer, and then present that to the board. So I'll be working with Jordan Davis and very heavily in presenting that to the board, and I was given 6 to 8 months. So, my role has changed from more of I was able to be an individual contributor in business license, and I help out a lot as far as like processing applications for business license. We have over 8,000 businesses and renewals, new applications, and then also alcohol is ramping up, as I just discussed. So, I have a very small staff. So I'm looking for somebody to help out in business license, to kind of have that as a little specialty area. I also have an administrative assistant that helps me out with alcohol, but I would like to get out there in the community. I would like to visit our businesses and, offer that accelerated customer service level, maybe have webinars or little, meetings on how to do business in the county, anything that could get us a little bit more out there, to our customers, our citizens. I think that's what I want to accomplish in this department. And I think that's what the board wants. Customer service is huge, and first and foremost, and we want to get out there. I thought about a couple ideas. I don't know. We've been tasked with efficiencies. We've talked to Mr. Gruen and Mr. Johnson about an efficiency, and I'm looking to get our department digital. So with that being said, that I'm looking to save some money there. So it might help offset some of the fees or some of the staff costs. So, if we just estimate staff time for filing, and we estimate the storage fees that we pay currently, and then also the office, the paper and all that encompasses, we're looking at over $6,000 in savings right there. So that's something that I'm working on. Also, I know that Mr. Gruen and I have discussed, we have one of the lowest administrative fees out of any municipality. We charge a $25 administrative fee, and we have really, really low occupational tax fees. So I don't know, we have not looked at our occupational tax ordinance and upped our fees or any of the administrative in 17 plus years, I believe. Our administrative fee is $25. If you look at any other surrounding municipalities, we are at least 50% lower than Gwinnett, Cherokee, Hall County, Duluth, and then other counties like Milton, there's a $75, Cobb's $55, Gwinnett's $80.
Amy?
So that's something that we can look at and try to offset. If we just did $50 and we times it times 8,000 business licenses that we do for the administrative, that's $400,000. That would cover my staff. So
Amy,
that's my thoughts. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
I was gonna say, Amy, let's some questions. So, committee members, questions?
I just want to commend you on looking at it from the standpoint of comparison to the counties that neighbor ours. And if we are 50% less, then of course, I think we certainly need to come up with the same market fee that our neighbors have.
Did you say what Alpharetta is? I know you mentioned Milton.
You know what? I couldn't find City of Alpharetta is $50. Milton 75, Cobb 55, Cherokee 50. I had trouble finding Dunwoody, but I'm going to talk to the director later today because I have an alcohol, pitch at the work session later today. So it's like the UVC, it never stops. Hall County's $50, Duluth is $50, Gwinnett is $80. I can keep going. Those are just the ones that I was able to access, and I try to get all the surrounding ones.
So Amy, what is the number? So you said the fee is 25. How many of those does it apply to? How much do you generate today from that $25 fee?
Well, I think we have budgeted like 180,000.
But how
We
much do
usually
we
do
take in?
about,
Maybe Dave has
I'm
that.
sorry.
There's 185,000 on the budget.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, typically we hit that. I'd have to go look at what I don't have that number pulled, but I can get that for you.
'Cause
But we
here-
usually, we make that goal every year. So that's
Yeah.
our admin fee. So if we just upped it, like I said, we can cover the cost
Yeah.
of our staff.
Yeah, here's my
Amy.
point. If your cost is $485,000, maybe look at what fee it would take to cover the cost of your operation. If we charge more, then in effect, we're
Hmm.
charging more than it costs to provide the service, which gets a little questionable unless we're gonna look at justifying it with additional overhead costs.
Right.
Amy, would it be worth looking at I think we would definitely be justified to go to 50, especially if we provide better customer service. But at the same time, you and I've discussed about people, when I got complaints about how long it was taking their business license to be renewed and they needed it for loans. I know that Beaver Toyota, they've become that was a big, big issue for them. But is there a way that we could change the structure of our business license to be more like auto and go with their birthdays instead of doing them all due by, that way decrease the workload for the few months so you've spread it out year round and be able to better do customer service because of that?
Right. I know that's been a discussion. We haven't done anything, but there was a discussion on anniversary dates. That is something that we can look into. I will tell you that we do have a new software now. So we're our second week in. So we're working out some kinks, but that's going to help as well. So they have that customer service portal. So, I mean, we can see how that works this year. We're over our renewal period pretty much. But that's something that we can definitely discuss. I can look at. I think maybe the software might help as well. I will tell you that we're really good at turning around. I would say our department did a really good job. We're usually on the case. Unfortunately, Beaver Toyota didn't like what they heard, but they did get it in like 2 days. So realistically, we're not even a week out. We're usually same week. But yes, we can look into that, and that might help us out as well. Spreading the volume.
Yeah, if we increase the fee from $25 to $50, if we add another 185,000, that looks like it would just about cover our cost exactly.
Mhm.
Should we try to bring that up since you're on the agenda today with the full board? Eric?
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to consider that, the sooner that we, most people got their business licenses already updated, right, Amy?
Right. Yeah, we have the bulk. We have over $1 million that we've done. So, and typically we do 1.6, 1.7 million in business license. So we have the bulk of our licensing already complete. We're down a little bit because of the COVID. But I mean, we're still getting, I would say, about 10 business licenses a week, and alcohol. We're still rolling with that too.
Here, my point is, most people have already gotten their business license updated. So if the board increases the fee, for most people, it's not something that's going to impact them for a while. And the board could do that with a future effective date if that's where the board members would like to go. But
right, we can maybe start in 2021.
Let me hear from the board members. Committee members, what's your thought?
Yeah, go ahead and do it.
Go ahead and bring it on. I mean, it's a pretty small fee per business.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think we should absolutely be competitive, well, within the range of what our neighbors are. Makes sense.
Okay.
I mean, the bottom line is people go to where, I mean, the difference of a $25 fee and a $50 fee, in my opinion, is not going to keep people from coming to where their business needs to be located. And if that is what they're paying in Milton, Alpharetta, Hall County, do you know what Dawson, that would be interesting for North Forsyth, what Dawson charges? If you could find that out.
Okay, I can check that, and I'll let you know. I can email that to you.
I just think that's a fair, honestly, I think the businesses that I've worked with would rather pay more and get a better turnaround, even though, Amy, I know you're saying that you've got a great turnaround. Of course, we only hear from people that complain.
Right. And it happens, right? I mean, we're human and we do the best that we can do, but we typically do have a really good turnaround.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's bring that on to today's agenda and start moving forward with that.
Very good.
Well, thank you for your time. This is my first go around, so thank you very much.
Thanks for the great job you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to communications, slipping down page 189 for the summary. And quick overview of that, there's no new items requested. And the total budget's almost identical to the current budget. Virtually no change if you get out to 0.03%. I think it's up like $190 that's in total. And that's it.
And Commissioners, this is Karen Shields. I am on the line if you have any questions for me.
Questions or comments? Good morning, Karen.
Because it's pretty much just reduction. I'm seeing reductions.
We do have a few. There was we were asked to go with a zero-based budget this year if we could, and so we worked with Mr. Johnson with the finance team to accomplish that to the best of our ability, and I think we did a good job with just a 0.03. And Commissioner Mills, I did want to mention to your point on the using a consultant. We actually have not used Ms. Gardner this year. Her work on the census was to help us last year, and then she also assisted us when we had a family member out on FMLA for a little bit of time. And she was a great help to us, but we are fully staffed now and have not needed any assistance from consultants this year.
Eric, we thank you, Karen, for that. And I think that's a good use of money. But Eric, how we talked about the need maybe for a portable stage to be able to use at events, would that not be a good expense under communications that we could use, to have, for grand openings or for different types of events to be able to have that? I mean, I can see it being more than just a park and rec thing.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes those end up at Parks and Rec just because they have the facilities to be able to store them, like the trailer full of chairs. But I mean, you're right. It's community events that go beyond that. Whether the animal shelter has an event and wants to have that, or some community group wants to be able to use it.
I mean, I think that would be great if we had it for like the animal shelter event, just for, the library events. I just think that we could get a lot of use out of one that was portable. I don't know what it would cost, but I just think that it could, I've looked at Karen and them, we've done a lot of different things that, and it needed everywhere. I don't mean we always have to bring it out because I don't think it's necessary, but for certain events, it would be nice to have.
Sure. Yeah, the ones I've seen are like a trailer. So you
that.
just trailer it out to an event and then kind of unfold it but you can take it anywhere.
Yes, we're looking at ways to have a stronger presence at various community events, and so I appreciate your input on that, Commissioner Mills. That is one of the things we're looking to do.
I think if we get it, we're going to have a lot of requests for it.
That's the other thing that would come up. Yes, ma'am.
But that's a good thing. If we're going to buy something, it needs to be used.
It definitely does.
Okay.
Do you have something in your budget for something like that as a capital expense? Or could you
We
look
do not-
into it?
I can look into it. We do not have anything as that large. We were looking at getting some additional tents for us to use at various events, a portable podium, one that's easier for us to get around than we have right now, a portable PA system. We do have some of those funds in our budget for this year and next year, but nothing as large scale as what you're talking about. But we will definitely look into that and get back to everyone.
I think usually
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think the thing to prepare for is who staffs it in terms of doing it. And that's probably why a lot of times I've seen them at Parks Department do it, because they have staff that can work after hours or weekends to actually put it into position, remove it afterwards, as opposed to other departments that would have people in overtime. Well, let's get.
I would like to see it get, well, I don't care if it's in Park and Rec. I just would like for it to be able to be used by everybody.
Yeah.
You know, even if the chamber were to be having a big groundbreaking event on something we've worked on in economic development, you know, to be able to have that just to make the event look nicer. I can see that if we had something like that wasn't too high, I think that our special needs community could use it for their talent shows and different things too.
Right.
There are a lot of uses for something like that. And as you all know, communications is a shared service, and we're a department that works with every department on whatever their needs are. So we would, you know, be open to working with, like, as you said, Commissioner Mills, anyone who would need this. We might manage the use of it in the calendar and everything, but it would be the counties for the use of anyone in our community. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning. I do want to mention that the communications team, I'm going to give them a shout out here. They've been working very hard to make sure that our community is kept informed during all of this, and I want to thank you all for your support in doing that.
Thank you, Karen. You guys.
Thank them from us too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Eric, can you still hear me?
Yep, we can hear.
Okay. I got kicked out of VPN. I'm trying to sign back in, but I'll get on the phone if I have to. Finance on page 192. And let me see if I can start my computer. On the summary, there is one new requested position, and I think Becky's on the line too. It's for a grant administrator to help with the workload with the grants. And other than that, the budget is up 1.93%. Operating expenses are up about 5%. That's due to trying to budget enough for the audit cost each year, which, by the way, will be going out to an RFP this year, as it's time to take another look at what's out there for auditors. And with that, Becky?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Becky.
Thank you for your time. And I just wanted to say that since we've introduced the grant coordinator position, I think it was in 2018, that model has been extremely successful, and we've actually been awarded, I don't have the exact number, but it's over $7 million in grant funding. And so we've learned a lot in the last 2 years. And one thing is that the culture in the county needs to be more grant ready. We've made a lot of strides in that with the sheriff's office, with the fire department, with Parks and Rec. And so I just want to thank you for giving us that position in 2018, that it has been successful. Angela's doing a great job, and I think she needs more. She needs to be out more in the county developing the grant readiness focus. And so this position is to promote her to the grant administrator. It's one grade higher than what she's in now, and to backfill her position as the grant coordinator. But a couple things I can say. We have become more experienced and have gone through a couple of cycles in for example, the SAFER grant or the AFG grant for the fire department, and we're much quicker to respond with less effort and more efficiency. So I think that having that additional position would give us the opportunity to expand even greater opportunity for application. The other thing is that because we've been so successful in achieving and being awarded the grants, it has increased our grant management compliance and monitoring. But that's not what I'm asking for this position, because we have Sandra Stevenson, who is the budget and grants manager. She's provided a lot of experience on the compliance and grant management aspect. And then we also have promoted Stephen Mayfield to financial analyst, which leaves his budget and grants analyst position open. So we have the capacity, at least for now, to cover those additional demands on the finance staff for compliance, because, for example, the mental health grant has really opened my eyes from a compliance and monitoring perspective, and reporting as well. So that's the ask, and I appreciate I've learned a lot. Never had any experience in grants prior to this, and frankly, I'm really enjoying it. And Angela is a great person, and I'd like to help her continue on with her effective work. And she's also received a lot of training in the last 2 years through our training programs, our supplement programs. She's got another major class to attend, and then she'll have her certification.
Rebecca, may I ask you
So-
on that, please?
Okay, go ahead, Molly.
If you should out just a little bit for me of what the grant administrator will be doing since that's a position.
This is my vision, is that, of course, she would continue to research and make application for the various departments. But my vision for her would be to actually get in the departments, work with the departments more closely to help them help themselves from a grant perspective. We are I guess you would call us a generalist type model, in that we have to rely on the departments for their technical input on all grants. There's a lot of data, statistical data that's required. And as we develop those, I guess, gold medal basic information about the department, we can be more poised to respond to grant opportunities that come up that in the past would have taken us a lot longer to make awardable applications. So that's my vision for her, is to really be out in the county working with each department to develop their approach to grant funding.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Question. And I mean, Becky, you know how hard I pushed to get us a grant writer. I mean, you would find, considering that we have gotten $7 million, it literally was like pulling teeth in this county to ever get a person hired. I don't know what the reluctance was, but I'm concerned, and I guess it's just different ways of looking at it. I've got just a couple of concerns. That is the salary you're offering enough for somebody that might be already certified? Because I think Angela does a terrific job, and I like her so much, and I really like her desire to do the job well. But Angela took years. It took a while to get her trained to know what the job was, because she really did not have the experience when she was hired. So, and also, you can answer this too. The sheriff, when he came in with his budget, he had a grant writer in with the sheriff. I just don't want to see us going from being so enthusiastic about having it, that all of a sudden you're getting grant writers in fire, you're getting grant writers in sheriff, you're hiring have 2 grant writers here. I just don't want to see us going overboard and not have the amount of grants coming in to support the addition of 3 new employees.
So let me tag team on that question. Grants almost rarely supplant local dollars. We actually were very fortunate with the timing of the SAFER grant that we had not funded the positions for a new fire station when we applied for the grant, so the grant could help. But I guess a couple questions. One is, if we're in tight financial times and a grant supplements, which means that whatever the match is, and sometimes there's no match, but typically there's some type of match, that the match means that we're coming up with new money to do something that we haven't been doing or haven't done at the same level. So I guess the question is, are we really going to be going after more grants at a point in time when we're trying to hang on to what we do today? If we're forward thinking, we would. But Becky, I just sent a question this morning, but I think one thing that's important is that when we apply for grants, we're maximizing the recovery of administrative allowances so that we're not, we're recovering some of the costs of those grant positions as opposed to the county funding those plus whatever the match is. And sometimes it's only a 10% match and sometimes it's as much as a 50% match. But I think it's important that the county do as much as possible to recover those administrative costs, which not every grant allows, but many grants do allow you to cover your admin costs to manage the grant.
Regarding the mental health grant, for example, that is one grant that has been very demanding from an administrative perspective. And we are utilizing Sandra Stevenson's salary as a part of that match, or all of that match for that matter. And one comment I have about there's a, I guess it depends on semantics, whether it's, you call it a grant writer or a grant coordinator or a grant administrator. It's a group effort to actually write the grant. And I can speak from my perspective regarding the sheriff's office and their desire to have a grant coordinator. And that is, there's so much technical input that, you know, our policy states that each department has, it's a different definition, but each department would be, a person would be tagged as their grant administrator, in which they would provide the technical support for writing the grants. And that's just from a sheriff's office perspective, we don't have access to their database and their data for which they have to get the information for most of their grants. And there's a lot of grant funding opportunities for the sheriff's office. For the rest of the county, however, it's just it has seemed to put a burden on them when we ask them, we give them opportunities to make application for grants. And so I think having Angela freed up enough to go into those departments and develop that ahead of the grant opportunity gives us a better position to actually get it awarded. And one skill that I have said over and over again that Angela has brought to Forsyth County is her ability to network. You know, even though she didn't have the grant writing experience, her networking, and I can say specifically, her networking has allowed us to make very quality applications that have been awarded. I mean, no one thought we would get the mental health grant. We had a lot going against us when we made that application. You know, we were an affluent county. We didn't have enough jail data. And because of her, I guess, tenaciousness and her ability to network, we were able to make a very quality application and got awarded. So I just think she's very committed and very focused on getting the right answer for the right application. So any consideration you make, that would be great.
But do you think the salary's enough? That we ran into this before when we hired Angela.
I was just being mindful of the shift in what we're doing. I don't know that I guess it depends on, you can ask for anything. If you get it, that's good. But we've talked to some grant writers that are independent grant writers, and I think it is for now. I think for Angela, she's not quite certified. She will be this year. And, I know there's always a risk of losing someone that becomes more qualified to a higher paying salary. But we've got the tools in place now. If that happens, we can renegotiate their salary if that were to happen. But yes, I do. I believe it is.
Let me suggest we stop talking about a specific employee since we're in the budget discussion.
You hate to train somebody, and not talking about this specific, but you hate, I heard that in Gwinnett County, when they train a new policeman or deputy, that they sign a 3-year contract. I don't know do we do that here? But the training is what costs so much money.
Yes, it does. I agree.
The option we have with positions when we're bringing from outside is we don't necessarily have to hire at the minimum. So if we have the job evaluated properly, we have an entire range within which we can hire. When we do in-house promotions, there's a little bit less flexibility in terms of someone who is promoted in terms of the salary adjustments. But Becky, I still have my question. What are we doing to recover overhead costs? Because you talked about Sandra's cost, but the overhead for a grant includes all the extra effort by a variety of departments. It's finance, but it's also procurement, personal services, IS&T. There's a whole range of support departments that are impacted by additional contracts or additional personnel. So are we maximizing the administrative allowance in the grants that we have?
Well, we have not negotiated, I think it's an indirect fee.
Yep.
And we're looking into that. But we haven't yet negotiated an indirect fee.
Yeah. Usually that requires a consultant to do a cost allocation plan. Sorry, Commissioner, I did that for a living a few decades ago. It's basically a program that they fill a bunch of data into, and the federal government's then agencies buy off on that. But if we're not recovering the administrative costs, then every time we do another grant, we're adding a little bit more burden onto a whole bunch of different programs, that some of which are on the call today but aren't talking yet.
Well, in a past life, if I recall, the administrative fee for a grant from a government grant was about 15% that was allocated. So
yeah, you just have to have the documentation to satisfy the agency. But the key is, otherwise we not only have a match, but we have a hidden cost that a bunch of other departments absorb for Donna having another contract or two, or maybe several that she's negotiating, and obviously we have out-of-pocket costs for Ken to be able to support us on these efforts. So to the extent that we can maximize recovery of our administrative costs, that helps us not have these hidden costs associated with some of these grants.
And I agree with what Becky said about having somebody that's just in the know about all the grant opportunities, because you take that Eagles Beak grant, and I got the email and saw it, and because Jim was ready and had a design ready, that was a $2.25 million grant, and that's jump starting a park that wasn't even on anybody's radar, as far as being funded, and the grant did that. But it was a brand new grant. We happened to be just ready, but if we had an employee that watches for those grants all the time from all the different resources, like mental health right now, there is a ton of money being thrown at mental health federally. That we could get because of this COVID thing. Even it's went up exponentially, and there might be rationale that would even fit with our current mental health grant that could help us better implement that grant, which is what y'all been doing. And I think that Healthiest County grant that we've worked on together would help with that data warehouse. But those are the type things that once you start down the road, you can piggyback. It's like creating a vision and creating a framework. And that's why Gwinnett County and other places have such really robust grant program, because it does pay for itself. But it needs managing correctly.
Yeah.
One of the things too with that that came to mind while Commissioner Mills was talking is that we're about to have a decrease from the state funding. We know that 14% across the board cut. So with increasing our ability to apply for and get grants, that may help balance out some of that loss.
I agree.
Okay, other questions for finance? Okay. Thanks, Becky.
You're welcome.
All right. If you can still hear me, we'll move on to GIS and slip down to page 195. There are no additional requests here. And the total budget is down, again, 10.9%. That's because of the capital that was in there last year that's not in there this year. The operating expenses are up 3.66%, and that's mostly driven by the salary and benefit costs. And with that, I think Brandon's available. I don't know if John's on as well or not.
Yep. They're both on.
All right.
Question with the revenue. What happened with the revenue that charges for services?
Oh, that was a change in process. We used to have this is their cost allocation to other funds.
Okay.
And primarily water. We used to have that up in the general government area. I mean, the general part of the general fund. We're now, we started last year or this year with placing it with the related department.
Okay.
So you'll see that again in IS&T too.
Great. Thank you. Well, I just comment, this is an area where I think we've seen some incredible advances in terms of what the public has access to that now I can't remember what's on our homepage, but the ability to look at a map and drill down to look at what's happening in terms of the yellow or orange sign that's posted on a particular site and get all the backup detail. That's incredible capability.
I'm really impressed. I mean, because the GIS has improved so much, yet your overall expenditures is down almost 11%.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, Commissioner, is as Dave stated, a lot of that is in the capital, and you have to remember this budget is in the off year of our flights, which is our biggest capital expense. You'll see that come back in 2022, but you're going to see it at a reduced rate because we were able to renegotiate out of the regional commission contract and go directly to the supplier. So we were actually able to save around $19,000-$20,000, right around in that area.
Okay.
So,
well, Brandon, go ahead and take the bows. I mean, take it for 2021.
well, I just, for me, I'm always planning ahead, Commissioner. So when you ask me why are my expenses back up 11%, I can say, well, remember the flight discussion, right? So, but no, the team has just done a tremendous job. I think when you look at what we've been able to supply the citizen with at their disposal, and even with this COVID issue, the team rallied around and said, how do we provide this function digitally without them having to come into the office? And they were able to do that in just a very, very short amount of time. So I'm extremely pleased. I think we've continued to up the quality year over year. We're doing it really at the cost of the salary increases. We've managed expenses very well within GIS. So I'm extremely pleased with where we are. We have a world-class GIS department. I will just tell you that right now. The staff that we have, the expertise, the tools that you all have provided us with the approval of the capital, has just really created a world-class GIS environment. I'd put our group up against anybody in the industry. When we talk about consultants, I never look to bring in a consultant on the GIS side to do work for you. We may do it on some of the technical side of things because of the expertise, but when it comes to how to apply GIS and how to provide support to the citizen, I'll put our GIS department up against anybody in the country.
Well, it's also a reflection of your leadership, Brandon. Thank you.
Hoorah.
Hey, Brandon, I've got a question, or two or three. On how do you think our 311 service is working now? That's the first one.
Yeah, well, I don't think 311, which is kind of outside of GIS, commissioners, let me just be clear about that, but I don't think it's working the way that we anticipated it. I think part of it is business process related, I think, but then part of it's technical. We've had an issue with the citizen side of 311 and the ease of use. I will tell you that in August, we are going to be redoing that with our vendor. And we're moving to a new product called My Civic. It's the same vendor. They've just rebranded and they bought another technology platform is what they've done. And we're going to be implementing that. Once we have that, Commissioner Mills, I think you're going to see really the adoption rate of 311 in the county skyrocket. And the reason I say that is because with the implementation of InterGov and planning, we're also going to now be able to integrate 311 into that solution for code enforcement. So we're going to start to see some efficiencies. We're going to start to see some visibility in the data start to really improve. So I would say it's not where it needs to be, Commissioner Mills. I think it will be there in August.
That's good to know. And I think also we need to look at if rolling it out in a big way to the community through communications, and doing things like people that call in on Carla's line when she puts them on hold. That way, it might reduce the number of calls she's getting to be able to say it while they're on hold. You can dial, 311 and report so-and-so and have that function in all the departments. I mean, just using that on hold time as a way of selling what our county can do and the information, that's available. That also goes with Brandon. I know that I talked to you about it way back when I went to NACO, some training with Qualtrics or whatever, about doing surveying when people finish like with 311 or when they finish with any department that we have, they can click a button and be able to answer a quick survey about their customer service. I think that would be a wonderful feature to have.
Yeah, it's actually built into the software that we have, Commissioner Mills. So I think once and I agree with you, I think we need a full marketing plan when we're ready to roll this thing. To me, the holdup right now is the technology piece. I'll just be brutally honest with you. I don't want to fully roll this yet and market it because it's going to change drastically within the next couple of months. Right now, we're using it internally. So it's not that we're not using the software. We are using the software, but the full-scale rollout to the public is going to happen in August. And I agree with you. It does have a survey component to it, and we'll be able to turn that on as well.
And I think it should go beyond just that, though. I think we should survey people with all departments. I just think that if we're going to get better, and lastly, this is my last thing. I remember when you were hired, Brandon, and we sat and you and I talked about, and you used the term that each department was operating within a silo, and you saw GIS as being the umbrella that could bring all the silos together. Do you think we're there yet? Are we getting closer?
We're much closer, Commissioner. I will tell you that, and it's not just from a GIS perspective. This is also from how we're utilizing our HR payroll software now integrated into our ERP solution. How InterGov now is integrated with our financial system that it wasn't before. So our overall vision is to reduce that silo approach, right? And the way that we're doing that is through these major software implementations. As we look at InterGov, as we look at, Tyler with the ERP solution for financials, as we look at it for payroll and human resources. All of those things are meant to start to bring you all as the decision makers. How do we bring you the data that is running in all these various departments so that you're getting a holistic picture of how the county is running? So we're making great strides. GIS is certainly a component of that. I think what you've seen with GIS, the way that, as Eric talked about with the Insights to Foresight software, where we're pulling information from tax assessor, we're pulling information from planning, we're pulling information from tax commissioner in some cases. So a lot of that, Commissioner, I do see is happening. Are we there? We will never be there. I will tell you that right now. There is no end game as far as that's concerned, but I will tell you we are much further along than where we were. Certainly, I think when I started, but I would say just over the last year, I think we've made some tremendous strides in how we're looking at an enterprise approach to software at the county, and I think that's critical.
And I think you could tell that, Brandon, I appreciate all that you've said about customer service, but can you tell the uptick in departments using your services as well?
I'd have to ask you what's that metric based on, Commissioner? So if it's do we see our departments coming to us and saying, hey, how should we be looking at software? Should we be doing certain things? Can we look at other integrations? I will tell you that has increased dramatically since I've been here. So I would say the short answer to that is yes. The longer answer is, I think we'll have to see it in, are we willing to kind of change our business processes in such a way that takes advantage of all of the integration capabilities? And that's where we're going to see the silos get reduced. Are the departments willing to modify their business process and the way that they work? And all indications of that are yes, Commissioner. I mean, I think the InterGov software implementation is a huge example of that, where it's requiring some process change within the department, but that process change is also now allowing a lot of the integrations that flow all the way into GIS. So I would say we're making great strides there. Are we where are we there as fast as I want us to be there? No. But I will tell you, I think we're moving, the trend is certainly in the right direction.
Thank you.
I think you heard a little bit of that when Steve was on earlier. There's an instinct for people to buy the best of breed in their particular program area, except that those don't integrate very well. But Commissioner, I think to add to Brandon's comment, I think there's some additional culture change needed within the organization for people to understand that the 311 solution allows the ability not just to track the questions and complaints within a single department, but be able to see across the organization if the same person is a frequent flyer in multiple program areas as opposed to that information just showing up. So I think we still have some culture change in addition to some of the technology that Brandon was talking about. But other GIS questions, and thanks, Brandon, for reminding me the name of the software. Anyone else?
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
And Brandon will still be up. Next is IS&T in page 198. And this is, just overall, this is just under a $4.6 million budget, if you will. This is the cost of technical services to this entire organization seen here. And the revenue up again, the $1 million in revenue is what is charged out to other funds other than the general fund, such as fire, water and sewer, engineering, and so on. That's their share of these costs. The budget itself is flat. It's actually down 0.87%. And again, the reduction in operating expenses more than offsets the increase in costs for salaries and benefits. Now, a 4% reduction in operating expenses here, because we're talking about $2 million, is a little bit more than a few dollars we see in a few other departments. Operating expenses are actually down $90,000. And while some of this is just budget reductions of what wasn't needed, this department, I can say for Brandon, has seen some real cost reductions in what they've arranged with service providers and other vendors that we deal with. And there's nothing new requested. Not that they're not doing anything new, but they've been able to fund new things within their current budget for the last couple of years. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brandon and the committee.
I'll just say, kind of piggybacking on the GIS team as well. Our focus is continuing to do more with less. That is my mantra in IT. I've had it in my entire career, and I'll continue to use it. And we've been able to do that here within the IST department very, very well over the last couple of years. What you don't see in the budget is the increase in capabilities that we've been able to deliver for less cost. That's a reflection of you all voting on some of the big contracts that we bring to you and approving those. Our telecom contracts, we've been able to cut significantly, but at the same time, we've actually doubled our capacity. So when we look at our ability to provide remote working, teleworking, we were able to do that really quite seamlessly from a technology perspective. Certainly, I think from a user perspective, getting our users used to working remotely has been a challenge. But from a technology perspective, we doubled our capacity in both our network speed, but more importantly, in our redundancy. We now have full redundancy for our telecommunication circuits that we've never had in the county. And we're able to do that at a reduced cost, which is what you expect out of your IT department, to be quite honest with you. Cost of technology continues to go down over time. It's about making the right investments for where we are as an organization and as a county. And so I think what you see here is we're continuing to add. When you look at our security posture as well, we through a lot of the stuff that you all voted on and approved, our security posture has improved, I would say, tenfold just over the last couple of years, just in how we're utilizing technology, how we're leveraging technology. So I'm just extremely pleased. With the team, with their focus on cost, because it's easy for IT teams to always bring new technology and say we need to spend. For us, it's targeted investments, and it's how do we continue to reduce the cost of IT services over time. And that's what this budget reflects.
How many people, Brandon, do you have that actually come into the office every day?
0 right now, Commissioner.
Well, you know what I mean, when you start back.
When we start back, we're going to, my mantra to my team has been, if you are productive working remotely, stay remotely and allow the people that need to be in the office, the use of PPE, all of that things. I want my department to be mindful of that and not just coming back into the office because they're ready to come back in the office. I'll have, Commissioner, maybe 2 people out of my 20 in IT will need to be in the office, depending upon, and that's my help desk technicians that need to be there replacing equipment or fixing things for people that are on site. We're going to go into that with 1 to start with. As the building reopens and we see the level of need. But I don't see it going above 2, Commissioner Mills, for the next month or 2 for sure. My team knows that if they need to be in the office to come in to put hands on certain things, they do that, but then they get back out of the office. We're not officing in the traditional sense moving forward.
It might be, we're so short on space, which I know you've got so much equipment, but it might be a good utilization of space reallocation in the future.
I fully support that, Commissioner Mills. I mean, at a minimum, I see us moving to a hotel type model to where my space utilization at a minimum would go to 50%. of what I have. And that would be if I made the decision to bring everybody back in the office for certain days of the week. So I would see us starting to share office space. So if I have people that need to come into the office, we've got maybe 3 desks versus the 20 that I've got today, to where we're just rotating people into those office spaces if they need to be in the office for a particular period of time. We're fortunate, Commissioner Mills. We're able to do 99% of what we do, we can do remotely. That 1% may be if we have to have somebody come in because a server is having an issue or we need to fix a drive or something that requires hands-on. But that is the exception, not the norm for my staff.
At least that gives Eric and Tim and whoever the ability to have maybe some extra space. We've not had that in forever.
Absolutely.
And there's been no change in productivity that you can tell, Brandon, with folks working remotely?
You know, Commissioner Cooper, I would say when we first started with my GIS staff and how they were having to take plans and read them off PDF screens and those kinds of things, we saw it was taking a little bit longer because we measure just about everything within GIS and IT. We did see that we were spending a little bit more time getting plans. So when I say that, think of things like, taking a stormwater plan that was submitted by a developer and getting that into our stormwater layer. That was taking a little bit longer. We've seen that improve though, as our staff is getting used to working remotely, to where we've said, hey, take your screens. Using multiple screens is very efficient for GIS folks. Take those screens home, make sure that you can have the same environment that you had in the office and be able to do that remotely. And so we've seen that time continue to come down. So I would say overall, our productivity is exactly where we were pre-COVID, even working remotely.
Very good. Excellent. And you're going to be changing over to Apple pretty soon.
Well, we'll at least support one in the environment. How's that?
GIS doesn't do Apple.
I think we've run through the time we had publicly noticed for this meeting, but I know Commissioner Mills, that the item that you added at the beginning, before we go, we ought to go back and talk about. I think you wanted to set a limit to the budget, or how would you describe it?
I want us to, I think you've heard from all of us that we have a desire to reduce the budget based upon, even if we reduce it, and have a supplemental budget later, but how can we move things out of next year's budget and then have maybe set up something for later, something to come back to us with options.
Okay.
We've talked around it a lot, but, the sheriff said he thought that the deputies, or from his standpoint, I asked the question about raises, and he thought 2% might be good, and then to be able to look at, another. Well, we need to know, what does that mean dollar-wise? That's just one option. If we cut, $125,000 out of our beautification, if we use that though to hire another employee in planning for UDC, what does that mean? What are there other ways that we can look at, budget items and reductions and that won't cripple us, or that we need to look at, what does that mean from a service providing standpoint?
So Dave, do you think we can start to assemble a list of some of these items? I don't know, Commissioner, do you want departments to offer reductions? My only concern is how we characterize it, so we don't have someone propose to reduce service. But we can certainly look at additional opportunities, kind of department by department, maybe guided by finance or.
Yeah, and we might not have to do it by department if Dave finds enough cushion in the budget, you know, between salaries and between, I just don't know how we're going to make decisions if we wait till the very end to start looking at these things. I think we
Yeah.
need to start looking at some of it right now.
I think we all agree. Maybe Dave, it's another sheet where you start to lay out options for some savings.
Okay.
I mean, for me, one option, certainly, the sheriff had over $400,000 worth of vehicles for the positions that he was, had on his list, but that could be a splost option to keep that from hitting the general fund. The 600 and, is it $75,000?
Right.
$625,000 from the visioning money. I mean, start to lay those out, the savings from a reduction in the merit increase, with the option still being available to the board to come back and revisit that either at the beginning of the year or partway through the year when you have a much better sense of where things will be. So maybe start to
What
put all
about
these
the sheriff?
together.
You didn't like the sheriff's idea about raising the mileage from 100 to 125,000?
Well, I went back and talked to him. I think the challenge is, in the long run, it'll end up costing us more. So if we needed to, we certainly can. I think the challenge is, you put off for 1 year a vehicle and suddenly you're replacing transmissions and air conditioners. So we just had a consultant come in and encourage us to set some better standards for replacement. You can. I mean, it's certainly an option, Commissioner. My concern is you'll pay that back over the next 2 or 3 years based on vehicles that suddenly have major maintenance. And the challenge with that is you need to have more spares, because if a vehicle is in for a transmission change, it's out of service longer, which means you have to have more spare vehicles available because the deputy still needs to have a vehicle. I don't think anything is off the table. I think we need to poke and prod at any opportunity. The one thing that I would point out is we have some low mileage vehicles that aren't being used. I think one thing that we could look at is whether some people can share a vehicle, whether it's 4 people sharing 3 vehicles so that we put more mileage on each of those 3 vehicles. Our challenge is we're going to have some vehicles replaced with low mileage because they're getting old and it's hard to find parts, but they have low mileage. And we shouldn't have low mileage vehicles. One note I made, we had Amy talk about the guy who used to be down in the lobby greeting people, and we've replaced him with a deputy, but he's out driving from business to business, checking on whether they have a business license. He's driving a 2019 Ford F-150. I don't think you need an F-150 to drive around from business to business. So if there's a better model in terms of what type of a vehicle he drives, we might be able to find some ways to drive our costs down. So I think vehicles is an area to look, and it may be that we go to a higher mileage, but I think we need to look at every opportunity.
Well,
And when they did that fleet study, did they not look at how we could reduce the fleet? I mean, honestly, it seems like to me, we've got way too many vehicles.
I agree. I think before we start buying new vehicles, we need to look at whether we can come up with better utilization. Now that we have reliable vehicles, when you have unreliable vehicles, you need a whole bunch of them, because when they're in the shop, you need to have a spare. But when you have newer vehicles, you don't need as many spares. You don't have as much downtime. But we have some vehicles with low mileage because the people driving them aren't driving them that many miles. We need to look at what we can do there.
And 2 things. One, from the Board of Commissioners standpoint, the 3 of us, we can chime in. I've never used a company vehicle for anything. I don't know if the other 2 commissioners find that is something that is important to have that accessible to commissioners. You can chime in and answer what you think. And also, as far as the beautification fund goes, that gives an extra $625,000 a year if we cut that beautification funding in half. So,
yeah, that's big bucks. That goes a long
and
way.
Dennis, what do you think on the vehicles? Do you ever use a county vehicle for anything?
Yeah, well, I've used them in the past to go like to the annual conference down at Savannah, where the we'd ride with another commissioner to save cost on mileage or gas.
It's like once
But
a year.
It's very, I mean, it's not that often though.
Yeah, like once a year kind of thing.
Yeah, once or twice, yeah.
I've never used it.
Well, that's another budget I think we need to look at from commissioner's standpoint. If the other two commissioners agree, of course, I don't want to speak for them, as well as on the beautification reduction. They have to chime in on that as well. But for us, that's something else we could look at from a commissioner's standpoint. That may be something that we really don't have a need for and access to that at the level that we have it presently.
And that becomes a vehicle that can be used by more people as a pool vehicle.
Exactly, and not used on a regular basis, because I don't think any of us really do. And it's not necessary. It really isn't.
So maybe between now and the next meeting, we'll start to accumulate some of these items. And so back to Commissioner Mills' comment, we're not going to ask departments necessarily across the board to be looking at things, but we'll look for opportunities where we can come up with some additional savings for the Finance Committee to consider and ultimately bring forward to the board. We will add to the agenda today the item about the Dave, is it the occupational license fee that we're talking about?
Right, it's the admin charge amount, the admin
administrative
fee.
charge that goes along with the
Right.
occupational license. Okay,
And add that to our work session today.
we add that today. That's on an annual basis, 180,000. We may not get much this year because most of those licenses have been renewed, but at least we give people heads up that next year when they renew that it'll cost $25 more, and that sounds reasonable compared to everybody around us. So,
And I like it when we just move right along. That's good.
okay. Is there anything else you want to bring up today?
Not from me.
Okay. Dave, when is our next meeting?
Well, next meeting
Sandra?
is Thursday morning at 9 o'clock.
Okay,
And we'll have about half of these items remaining. It was on this agenda, maybe about a dozen areas. So depending on the
Okay.
pace of the meeting, it's up to the committee. We may finish all these areas on Thursday. Where we're at, I can give a brief overview, just to see where I think we're going, and we'll try to update these numbers by the time we get to that meeting. I was looking at my summary, and I'll update that. And I think the continuation budget started at about 151.9 million. The current adopted budget, or the prior year budget for 2020, is 149.7 million. I've heard suggested reductions of about $1 million or more. So that's going to bring us down to about 1.2 million roughly above the prior year adopted budget. So that's just a little bit of a context, but I'll put those numbers in that summary that I gave the committee earlier and try to have that updated for Thursday morning. And just as far as a number to work toward is concerned, and that'll be drawn off of that list of items that you mentioned, Eric, that we could put together showing suggested changes.
okay. Good.
Well, and you'll have the addition in revenue for the other if the board votes to do that. But I think that, Dave, we're relying on you to help us find other mechanisms to reduce, not just what we as a board come up with. I mean, I think we need to look at other, I mean, you know this budget better than we do.
Okay, well, I
Or
can
you
certainly do
better.
that. We can certainly do that, but I'll go back to what you said, Commissioner, at the very beginning. And what amount are we to budget to? I mean, right now we're within the estimated revenues in the tax digest. We're able to balance this, if you will, but that might not be the level you want to balance it at. So, working toward last year's adopted budget, that's one thing to work toward, that 149.7 million. Like you said earlier, too, this is a very fluid situation because with each month we'll get more data about this recession. And that's what I think all of our concern is that the revenues may be below last year's adopted budget. So we need to keep an eye on that.
Well, and one of
Yeah, I mean, we discussed up front of maybe a 5% reduction if in our numbers, if we thought that if it was going to come in, and that might be a little high, but if we thought overall we were going to be 10%, if we could come up with 5 and then we had a 4% increase in our tax digest, then, we might be, in good shape.
Okay.
and Dave, with that, could you give us the information as to where the increases are? sort of flesh that out for us, more detailed
The increases, you talking about the revenue side or the expenditure side?
expense?
Expense?
Mhm. Yeah, from
Okay.
20 to 21. Yes, please.
Okay. And on that summary that I gave you all, there was 2 attached pages. You don't have to go to it now, where I listed department by department, the prior year budget and the continuation budget, and you can see the change in each area there.
But Dave, when you've got that in there for employees and you say based on salaries, was that with a 4% raise?
Exactly. That 4% was, I'm going to the bottom of that page, was the 2.3 million or 580,000 for each 1%. And now
So
we're going
for
to be working.
example, if you made an assumption of 2% for now, with the opportunity for the board to revisit that, and as the sheriff talked about, possibly having a second increase sometime during next year, that takes $1 million out of the general fund just there, plus some savings in the fire fund as well,
And you'll be
and
down
the
to
utility fund.
just about last year's budget, adopted budget for 2020.
I like that, and I'll tell you why I like it. Because we maintained throughout this whole COVID thing where other counties didn't. And we've been able to do that. So they have to look at that 4% and bring that. It's a balance.
Okay. Staff is also paring that number back too for each 1%, because as of July 1st, any new employees that come on would not share in that compensation adjustment next year. We know which positions will be vacant by July 1 from this distance. So we're going to be backing off of some of that per each 1% to start with. So yeah, we're able with that move to get, I think, right back to what the prior year adopted budget was. Then we can work on 5% below that if that's what you're looking at, Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I mean, and we might not have to do that much, but I think we got to have a number. We got to have something we're looking at. I mean, at least if we can. Yeah, we do. We need options. And I'm a little confused on healthcare costs, because I thought, Dave, in one of our monthly meetings with Eric, y'all had said that our wellness center was really about to break even. Where is our increase coming?
Just overall claims beyond the health center. I mean, the health center is helping. And again, I'm looking at, we just got our draft in, closing the books from our auditors for last year. I'm still hopeful I can back off of this healthcare increase. So I may gain a couple $100,000 there. I just started off at the 3% to allow for some increases, but we just got some data from our health insurance brokers. And so I think we have some room there, because I think the health insurance fund is in very good shape now. It has some reserves. So you're right. There's some room in different places to start paring this back, I think, from what we know now.
I would love sometime when you do an update to the board about the wellness center and the cost, I would love to look at the history of in the time I've been on the board. I mean, I'm telling y'all, there were some years, Dave, we were looking at a 12% increase.
Right.
I think one year was 14. I mean, it was huge. I mean, it was some really big, when the whole Cadillac tax was in place and all. I mean, we have definitely seen some great strides in improving in what we're offering in healthcare and the reduction in cost.
Right. Yeah, the program's improved greatly, because you're right. We had some very large increases. We had a couple of years where we were slammed with a lot of heavy and large claims.
All right, anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn? And we'll be back on Thursday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank
Eric,
you.
Yes.
Eric,
Yes, sir.
You want to stay on for hours here?
Yeah, we can stay on and do our briefing.
Who else is Dave?